Hey everybody, Kimmy here. I wanted to go over the first 10 books that I've read. So at the beginning of the year, I set a goal for myself to read 25 books in 2024. I wanted to really become a reader. 25 compared to 0 books all the years past, I think was a pretty good goal. But I've kind of crushed that, kind of blown it out of the water. I've really gotten into enjoying reading, and it's something that I look forward to doing every single day. I was worried at first that I really wouldn't find the time, or I would find too many excuses to find the time to read, kind of like what I do with finding excuses to go to the gym. But anyway, it's really been something that I've been enjoying, so I really try to get at least an hour of reading in every single day, and typically that's when I crawl into bed. I'm usually reading right then, or when I'm, chilling with the dogs in the living room, I'll pick up a book and read then as well. When they're, allowing me to and not acting like total crazy idiots. So the first 10 books I read, 2 of them were actually right before the start of the new year, and then leading up until ending in January. I got this really cool reading journal on Amazon, and it is allowing me, I also have a Goodreads app on my phone and my Kindle, which allows me to track, everything I'm reading. But I like this because it gives me like a whole review and information on each book I'm reading and lets me jot down my thoughts and what I thought about it. The first book I read was The Carnivore Diet by Dr. Shawn Baker. He's a great YouTuber as well. So if you're interested in the carnivore diet and getting some insight, I totally recommend checking him out. But that book was kind of my entry into reading again. I picked it up at Barnes & Noble. I have the physical copy, and what I liked about it was super easy to read. He used layman terms for us idiots who don't know the medical lingo. It was very explanatory of the carnivore diet, used a lot of, scientific facts and just common sense in general. The fact that humans have been eating meat since the beginning of humans. I mean, it just really brings it to a point in your mind where you really understand it. You're like, yeah, why do people trash talk meat so much when it's literally what the first humans were eating? All they were eating was the megafauna animals that are now extinct, but that's all we've been eating. And then through time, we've only been eating grains for a few, thousands of years, maybe 10 or 15,000 years or whatever it is. Seed oils for even less, like 100 years. I mean, when you really break it down and think about the existence of humans, that's what I really liked about this book. It really made a lot of sense to me. Also, I liked that there was a lot of anecdotal testimonies of true life stories from other people, and they had quite a few of those in there. But yeah, it was just a really good, reassuring book to read when I started this diet, and I'm glad I read it, and I 10 out of 10 recommend it for anybody else out there. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. The second book I read right before the new year was The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Manson. I really wanted to read this basically just because of the title, and I think in the mood I was in when I started looking for books, I was like, damn, that sounds right up my alley. And for me, nonfiction is kind of like where my sweet spot is. I'm just starting to dabble in fiction, but I really wanted books that would rope me in. What I liked about the book, it was brutally honest. A lot of cussing in the book, kind of bitter sounding in some places, but basically the gist of it was exactly the title. You can't give a fuck about everything. You only got so many fucks to give. That was pretty much the gist of it. Learning to say no, being brutally open and honest about things, appreciating the ordinary things. It kind of went down that road. So for me, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The third book I read, this was the first book that I started reading after January, but it was called If You Tell by Gregg Olsen, and it's a true crime biography, and it was actually about a story of 3 sisters who have this crazy abusive mother, Shelley Notek. And this is a true story, and it happened in Washington State, which is my home state, which made it a little bit more interesting to me. But I thought this book was super good. I really liked it. And I kind of give credit to this book for really making me interested in reading more and more and more. I thought it was riveting. Like, it just kept me hooked in it the entire time. It was one of those books where you pick up and you don't really want to put it down. Another thing I liked about it was it had viewpoints from each of the three sisters and from different people inside of the book. So it wasn't just from one person's story. It actually captured multiple people's stories. It really reminded me of how narcissistic and manipulative people can be and what they can get away with when they're that manipulative and have that ability to brainwash people in that way. It just made me wondering, like, how the hell did this Shelley's husband go along with everything that she did? How are adults letting her treat them the way she did, do the things to them that she did? I don't want to give any spoilers. I thought it was an amazing story. I thought the author did a phenomenal job, and I was really upset when I finished reading the book. So I gave this one 5 out of 5, hands down. The next book I read was called Spilled Milk by K.L. Randis, and I actually didn't know what the genre was until after I finished the book, and it made me rethink a couple things. So it's a fiction novel based on an autobiography, based on her own story. To me, the book, essentially it was about her living through her abuse from her father when she was a child through her teen years. Half of the book was about her experiences and what she went through, and half of the book was about the court process and proceedings and the trials, her kind of coming up from the rubble, essentially, and building herself a new life. So, to me, the whole book was about resilience, I think was a good way to look at it, and about strength overall. There's a lot of good lessons, I feel like, in the book. So one of the things I took away, or that I didn't like initially, was the fact that a lot of the dialogue seemed really young adult, high schooly, cringy in a way. And then I learned that it was a fiction novel, so that made sense. Looking back, I was like, there's no way these people were saying these things. There's just no way. But it was exaggerated, obviously, and filled in the gaps because it was also fiction. It kind of came off as like a romance fiction in some little areas, which it was okay. It got a little bit boring through the court proceeding parts, but again, looking back at it, I think that was a good perspective that you don't really often get from a lot of these other sort of memoir abuse kind of books. So I think it was a good one for other people to read who may be going through the similar things, and really encouraging them to be strong through the whole process and not let the bad guy win. For me, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. All right, so the next book I read was Atomic Habits, and I feel like I saw this book and I was like, dang, that's going to be a good book, because the reviews were phenomenal. And then now, after I've read it, everyone's talking about it. I go to work even and people are talking about this book. I'm like, I just read that. So it's by James Clear. It's a self-help kind of inspirational, obviously nonfiction, but it's about building habits. So I thought this book was like the first couple pages I read, I was hooked. Everything made sense. Everything he was saying made sense. Tells you and teaches you real ways to build healthy habits. And then it made me realize that being routine, I always thought being routine was, boring or not exciting, but routines are actually extremely good for humans. We need routines. So instead of having just an all or nothing mentality where, we set a goal for ourselves and we either have to hit it and go all in or we've failed. That's not the approach that this book takes. So it's teaching you just to strive for 1% better each day. And if you do that by the end of the year, I can't remember the exact percentage, but you'll be 30 some odd % better than when you started at the beginning of the year. So it's all about those small changes that have a compounding result. So you picture, one of the analogies it took was, you have a plane starting from, let's say, LA, and you set the trajectory for New York, but you were just off by just a smidgen, and you started going just a couple percent off that track, and you land in like Washington, D.C., somewhere completely different. And then it talked about the ice cube analogy, where, an ice cube starts melting at 32 degrees. So you start working towards a goal, and you're working, and you're getting frustrated because you're not seeing any results. But all it takes is just that consistency, and then one day, boom, you're seeing results, and the ice cube starts melting, right? So let's say you're trying to lose weight, and you're working, and you feel like you're doing a great job of consistency, but you're not seeing any results, and you're getting frustrated, and you want to give up. But had you just kept going, there's going to be that one day where, boom, you see results immediately. After every chapter in the book, it gives you a chapter summary of the key takeaways, which I thought was really, really nice. It's one of those books where you're definitely going to reread it every year, or just keep it handy and revisit it. Another good lesson in the book is, instead of just focusing on your goal, right? So let's say, for instance, I'm doing, the carnivore diet and a weight loss goal and all of that stuff. So instead of just focusing on your goal, let's say I reach my goal, right? And then what? I just stop, I just give up, or I revert back to my old ways. You need to keep pushing through your goal. So instead of focusing just on your goals, you need to focus on the process and the system you put in place to achieve those goals, so you can sustain it after. It talks a lot about the laws of building healthy habits and how to reverse those laws and help you break bad habits. So overall, 5 out of 5 for this book, and I think everybody on the face of the planet should read it. So the next book, after I read Atomic Habits, I really wanted just an easy, quick read. I grabbed a book that I had from my teenage years. It was called The Afterlife by Gary Soto. It's a fiction book, just a short little read. It was about this kid who was killed immediately in the book. He was murdered for no good reason. And then he turned into a ghost spirit, and he was just floating around his town. And I thought that it was going to be impactful lessons throughout the book, but there was no lesson that I saw. There was no lesson. So he floated around. He ended up finding this girl, falling in love with this other floating spirit. He visited people, but there was no real lessons or takeaways. I didn't know where the book was going. I thought it had potential, but it fell completely flat for me. So I gave this one a 2 out of 5. The next book I read was 12 Years a Slave. Really switched it up there. A memoir about Solomon Northup. It's written by him. And if you've ever seen the movie 12 Years a Slave, that's where it came from. So I watched the movie a couple times in the past. I watched it actually just recently, maybe a few weeks before I read the book. This book by far took me the longest to read. It took me from January 9th to January 22nd. It was only 212 pages. Here's the thing. Obviously, I rated it 5 stars because you can't not rate somebody's story through slavery at 5 stars, okay? I found the first half of the book extremely hard to read through because it was written in 1853, and back then people talked really smart. They had a lot of good and big words that they used all the time. I just thought it was really hard to read because I'm stupid and I didn't understand what the heck he was saying half the time. So I really had to learn the language. And actually, it's kind of a shame. People used to sound so smart. Their vocabulary was so much bigger than ours today. I don't know. I don't get it. How did we become so dumb? How do we sound like idiots now? We literally sound like idiots. When I learned the language, then the last half of the book became a whole lot easier. And I stopped getting hung up on some certain words and things that he was saying, and I just went through it. Because I'm one of those people that I gotta understand and comprehend every single thing I'm reading, or else I'll reread it, right? I did read this on the Kindle, so I do like that, that you can just hold down on a word and comes up with the definition. So that was helpful. It was amazing to me how patient he was for freedom. He waited 12 years for the exact precise right time and right person to come along and help him before he finally sought freedom. Amazing perseverance. I mean, obviously one of the key takeaways is don't take things for granted, especially your freedom, right? Freedom to do anything. I definitely recommend you read this book, at least at a minimum, watch the movie. I thought the movie did a decent job at kind of capturing the true story. There was a lot of things in that book that obviously they don't talk about in the movie, but overall, like some of the most key events did get put into the movie. But I mean, you just walk away from this book with such an understanding of what they really went through, what slaves really went through, and the treatment that they got, and just the weird ways that they were treated and talked to. I don't know. It was a heartbreaking story. The way he was kidnapped. He was a free man and then kidnapped into slavery and sold off into the slave trade. I'm glad that Solomon was a very smart man and got the upper hand in the end. The next book I read I read this one in a day. It was Released Conversations on the Eve of Freedom, Gypsy-Rose's new book that she just came out with. It was 200 pages, really short book, really easy to read. So you really just fly through it. Here's what I thought. I thought it was a cash grab. I'm very familiar with all the other documentaries and stories about Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her story of her mom who had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. If you're not familiar, this is a real story. Gypsy ended up taking part in the murder of her mother to escape that situation that she was in. But this book for me was a cash grab. So she does explain in the book that this is not her memoir. Her memoir is coming out in 2024, so this year sometime. And the book is mainly boring transcripts of her conversations with another woman that was helping her write this book, pretty much. I didn't think there was no new information really. She talks about her life a little bit, but there was nothing new or revealing really in that life. The only thing I got out of it, because if you watch the Hulu, The Act, which is based on her story, the one thing I learned was she didn't actually get food pumped through her feeding tube. It was just like medications and fluids and stuff. So that was really the only thing I learned. It just seemed like, so this book was released just after she was released from prison last month. And it just seemed like something to kind of catapult her fame in a way. And to keep her relevant, I guess, in the media. So I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was another just quick read. I really wanted to go back and read this book, A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer. This is a book that I remember reading as a child, and I really wanted to reread it because I remember it being a really just heartbreaking story, and I felt like it deserved to be read again. So it's just a quick little read, 184 pages. What I thought about the book, I mean, obviously this kid, he's abused by his mom. It starts out as a fine, normal life, and then for whatever reason, his mom just flipped a script and started abusing him. He was stabbed. He was burned on the stove. I mean, poisoned. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This kid went through it all. So I don't understand how charges were never brought. I don't understand how the dad was such a coward. But it's a good reminder that these abusive type of stories are happening all around us. Like, it'd literally be happening across the street in the house right there, and I would have no idea. Well, that's the scary reality about it. There's so many red flags that nobody sees. This was based, I could be wrong, but in the 70s, if I remember right. So back then, you know, abuse was looked at in a far different way than it is now. But then I started reading the reviews, and there's so many people that think this story is fake or exaggerated. So I don't know. I don't know. I thought it was an awful story, and if it is all true, I'm glad that he got out of that. So because it's a memoir and because it was a pretty, lack of a better term, interesting read, I gave it 5 out of 5. So this next book is actually like my first attempt into getting into fiction. And it was called, and I just picked one of the best reviewed books there was out there. And it was called The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, whatever. And it's a psychological thriller. Essentially, this book is about this woman, without giving too much away. So it's about this woman who is an artist and she's living with her husband, and she starts writing in this diary. She's dealing with like depression and stuff and going through some mental things, and then she kills her husband and gets caught. She shoots him in the head. And then she ends up going through the trial, and then she ends up in a mental ward. So the book is about this is he a psychotherapist or something? He's a therapist for psychiatric therapy, and he ends up getting a job at the place where she's at so he could try to treat her. And then her diary comes into play. She doesn't talk. That's the whole point of this thing, right? The silent patient. After the killing of her husband, she went silent, mute. She doesn't talk the whole time at all. And he's trying to help her and get her to open up and you know, all that. So obviously there's some plot twists. Her diary comes back into play. Her diary is a huge part of the book in the ending to really say what happened. It's an interesting story. I thought the first like 3/4 of the book really dragged on, and then I thought the plot twist in it was rushed through. There were some things in the book where, looking back, now that I know what happened in the book, I'm like, why'd they even do that? Kind of seemed like a waste of time and just a filler in some ways. But for my first stab at fiction, I liked it. I don't know why I gave it 3 out of 5. I would probably give this one 4 out of 5. I think it deserves a 4. Oh, and I wrote my key takeaway on this book is don't cheat. Pretty simple. That's the first 10 books I've read. I've read an 11th book. I'm actually reading my 12th right now. I'll do another review, but wow. Can you believe that I have read this many books? I didn't even know that I could read that good. Oh man, what a crazy turn of events in my life. Let me just tell you, man, what a revelation. What a twisted turn of events. I'm in my own plot twist right now. Am I smarter? Do I sound more smart? Do I sound, oh my God, I'm just so much more educated now. No, but for real, it's been a lot of fun reading different books. I like recommendations, so if you have any recommendations, please put them down in the comments. I like nonfiction. I like true crime. I like memoirs. I like all of that kind of stuff. And then I do like good fiction. So the way, it's funny too, because if you look at like stats out there, way more women read fiction than men because men are more literal. They like facts and things of that nature, and that's totally how my brain operates. But then again, I do watch TV shows, I do watch movies, and a fiction book is no different than those. So that's how I'm going back in my mind, and I'm like, okay, I can really get into fiction. So we'll see. I don't really like fantasy time. I don't know. Maybe I would like it. I don't know. But anyway, all right, guys, thanks for watching this video. Appreciate you guys hanging out, and we'll see you on the next one.